Hidden in a convent for her shame, she lived forgotten, until the most desired duke came for her hand. The chapel bells of St. Lysa's convent tolled with finality, as they did every hour, but for Mariel Thorne, each ring was a reminder of her imprisonment. Kneeling in prayer, her long chestnut tresses concealed beneath a plain linen veil, she appeared the model of piety, yet her eyes, green as moss with flecks of gold, betrayed an unquenched spirit. "Sister Mariel," a stern voice interrupted her contemplation, "your penance awaits in the scriptorium." The abbess Iridel Vane stood in the doorway, her posture rigid as the stone walls surrounding them. Her blue-ice gaze swept over Mariel with familiar disappointment. "Yes, Reverend Mother," Mariel murmured, rising with practiced grace. Her fingers unconsciously sought the amber cord at her wrist, her sole possession, her mother's final gift. As she followed the abbess through chilled corridors, Mariel could feel the weight of whispers trailing behind her. 5 years had not dulled the convent's memory of her arrival, disheveled, weeping, branded with shame. "The girl who disgraced her family," they still murmured, "hidden away where her sin cannot taint others." In the scriptorium, Mariel took her place at the wooden desk, where manuscripts awaited her steady hand. She alone among the novices possessed the patience for such detailed work. The irony was not lost on her, that her shame had birthed such beauty. "You shall complete these pages before Vespers," Abbess Vane instructed, laying a hand heavily upon Mariel's shoulder. "And remember, child, tomorrow the bishop visits. Your behavior shall be exemplary." "As you wish, Reverend Mother," Mariel answered, bowing her head. Left alone, she dipped her quill and began the painstaking work. Hours passed as gilded letters flowed from her hand, her world reduced to the scratch of quill on parchment and the soft amber light filtering through narrow windows. When the door suddenly burst open, Mariel's hand jerked, sending ink spattering across her morning's work. "Sister Elitha," she gasped, seeing the young novice's flushed face. "Forgive me," Elitha whispered, eyes wide with excitement, "but the most extraordinary thing has happened. A carriage bearing the Valecrest crest has arrived." Mariel's quill slipped from her fingers. "The Duke of Valecrest here?" "Indeed, and he has requested to speak with the abbess immediately." A murmur had already begun rippling through the stone corridors, the nuns whispering behind cupped hands. Duke Darian Valecrest, the most eligible nobleman in the realm, whose name alone caused hearts to flutter at every ball and gathering. What business could a duke have at St. Lysa's? Mariel wondered aloud, her voice barely audible. "They say," Elitha whispered, leaning close, "that he seeks a donation for the chapel repairs." She hesitated, then added, "But Sister Constance overheard the abbess say your name." The blood drained from Mariel's face. "My name? That cannot be." Before Elitha could respond, the chapel bell tolled, summoning all to afternoon prayers. But as Mariel rose to follow, the door swung open once more. There stood Sister Maudlin, the abbess's most trusted attendant. "Sister Mariel," she announced, her thin lips barely moving, "the Reverend Mother demands your presence in the visitors' parlor. At once." Mariel's hand flew to her amber cord. "Me? But I—" "At once," Sister Maudlin repeated, her voice cutting like winter wind. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly as Mariel followed, aware of curious eyes tracking her passage. What could a duke possibly want with a forgotten woman, hidden away for her shame? The parlor door loomed before her, heavy oak that seldom opened to the outside world. Sister Maudlin knocked once, then stepped aside. "Enter," came the abbess's voice, sharper than Mariel had ever heard it. Gathering what courage remained to her, Mariel pushed open the door. Sunlight flooded the normally dim chamber, momentarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she found herself facing 3 figures. The abbess, standing like a sentinel, Father Alderic Wynne, the kindly priest whose visits brought rare comfort, and between them, a tall man whose very presence seemed to command the air in the room. The Duke of Valecrest turned, and his grey slate eyes met hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice deep and clear as a chapel bell. At last, the moment stretched between them like a thread of fate, taut and trembling. Mariel could not look away from those penetrating grey eyes that seemed to see through every wall she had built around her heart. "Your Grace," Abbess Vane interjected, her voice cutting through the silence. "As I was explaining, Sister Mariel has taken preliminary vows. Her path is with the church now." The Duke's gaze never left Mariel's face. "Preliminary, you say? Not final, then?" A flush crept up Mariel's neck. She had never seen a man so imposing, Yet there was something in his countenance, a controlled urgency that stirred forgotten feelings within her. "Miss Thorne," Duke Valecrest continued, taking a step toward her, "forgive this intrusion, but I've travelled far to speak with you on a matter of great importance." Abbess Vane moved between them with practiced swiftness. "Whatever matters exist between you must be conducted with proper supervision, Your Grace." A flicker of irritation crossed the Duke's face before composure returned. "Of course, Reverend Mother. I simply request a moment of private conversation with Miss Thorne. Father Aldrich may remain as chaperone if propriety demands it." Father Aldrich nodded gently. "I believe that would be appropriate, Reverend Mother." The abbess's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well. You may use the cloister garden. Sister Magdalene will escort you." She fixed Marielle with a warning glance. "Remember your place, child." The garden was a small walled sanctuary where medicinal herbs grew in neat rows. Here, with Father Aldrich seated discreetly on a stone bench some distance away, Marielle found herself walking beside the most desired bachelor in the kingdom, her heart hammering beneath her modest habit. "You must wonder why I've come," the Duke said after a moment of silence. Marielle kept her eyes on the gravel path. "I cannot imagine what business Your Grace could have with someone like me." "Someone like you?" There was a strange note in his voice. "And who precisely do you believe yourself to be, Miss Thorne?" The question startled her. No one had asked for her thoughts in years. "I am no one, Your Grace, a forgotten soul." He stopped abruptly, causing her to halt beside him. Forgotten? Perhaps by some, but not by all. Marielle dared to glance up. The Duke was studying her with an expression that might have been tenderness, had such a thing been possible. "Miss Thorne, Marielle," he said, his voice lowered, "I have spent the past 3 months searching for you." Her fingers instinctively tightened around her amber cord. "Searching, but why would—" "Because I made a promise to your mother before she died." The world seemed to tilt beneath Marielle's feet. "My mother, she died when I was 16, before I came here." "Indeed?" His eyes softened. "Lady Elaine Thorne was my father's closest friend. On her deathbed she extracted a vow from him to watch over you. When he passed last winter, that vow fell to me." Tears threatened at the corners of Marielle's eyes. "Then you know about my disgrace." Something flashed in the Duke's expression. Anger, perhaps, but not directed at her. "I know what the world believes, but more importantly, I have discovered what truly happened 5 years ago." Marielle's breath caught. "What do you mean?" The Duke glanced toward Father Aldrich, then back to her. "I have found evidence, Miss Thorne, documents proving your innocence in the matter that sent you here." A rush of emotion, hope, fear, disbelief washed over her. "That cannot be. My own father testified—" "Your father was deceived, as was the entire family." The Duke lowered his voice further. "Your cousin Roland orchestrated everything. The compromising situation, the witnesses, the scandal, all to ensure he would inherit your father's estate instead of you." Marielle's knees weakened. She reached for the nearest bench, sinking onto it as the weight of this revelation pressed upon her. "It cannot be," she whispered, though in her heart pieces long scattered began to align. "How could you possibly know this? Your cousin kept records. In his arrogance, he documented every step of his plan." The Duke's jaw tightened. "When he attempted to blackmail a business associate of mine using similar tactics, the truth emerged." Father Aldrich approached then, his kind face grave. "The Duke came to me first, child. I have seen the evidence myself." Marielle looked between them, trembling. "Even if this is true, what difference does it make now? My family disowned me. My reputation is destroyed." "Not destroyed," the Duke said firmly. "Stolen. And what is stolen can be reclaimed." He knelt before her then, a gesture so unexpected, so contrary to his station, that Marielle gasped. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice resonating with conviction, "I have come to take you from this place, to restore your name and honor, if you will permit it." Before she could respond, the garden gate swung open. Abbess Vane stood there, her face a mask of cold fury. "This interview is concluded," she announced. "Sister Marielle, return to your duties at once." As Marielle rose, the Duke stood also, his height and presence somehow making the formidable abbess seem diminished. "We shall speak again, Miss Thorne," he promised softly. But as Marielle was led away, she heard the abbess's chilling words to Father Aldrich. "Prepare the chapel. Her final vows will be administered tomorrow." Night fell over St. Lysa's convent, bringing with it a frigid silence broken only by the rhythmic chanting of evening prayers. But for the first time in 5 years, Marielle Thorne did not find peace in the familiar rituals. Her mind swirled with the Duke's revelations that her disgrace had been manufactured, her exile orchestrated by treachery. Locked in her sparse cell after Compline, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, running her thumb over the smooth amber cord at her wrist. Could it truly be possible? Had she suffered all these years for a lie? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Warily she approached the door. "Who is there?" she whispered. "It is I, Father Aldrich." The priest's gentle voice came muted through the heavy wood. "May I speak with you, child?" Mariel glanced anxiously at the corridor beyond. The abbess forbade any visitors. "I come not as a visitor, but as your confessor." A pause. "Please, Mariel. Time is short." She opened the door cautiously. Father Aldrich slipped inside, his usually serene features tense with urgency. "You must listen carefully," he whispered, taking her hands in his aged ones. "The Duke has not departed as the abbess believes. He remains at the village inn, determined to prevent tomorrow's ceremony." Hope fluttered in Mariel's chest like a captive bird. But how? "The abbess has decreed. The abbess has exceeded her authority." Father Aldrich's amber eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Forced vows are no vows at all in the eyes of God or church law. The Duke has sent for the bishop himself, with evidence of your innocence and the abbess's machinations." Mariel sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. "Why would he do this? Risk so much for someone like me?" Father Aldrich's expression softened. "I have known Darien Valacrest since he was a boy. He is a man of unflinching honor, who despises injustice above all things." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And I believe he sees in you something rare and precious." A flush warmed Mariel's cheeks. "That cannot be. He barely knows me." "Sometimes, child, the heart recognizes what the mind has yet to understand." The priest pressed something into her palm, a folded piece of parchment. "From his grace. Read it, then burn it. I shall return before dawn." After Father Aldrich departed, Mariel unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The Duke's handwriting was bold yet elegant, much like the man himself. "Miss Thorne, by the time you read this, I will have set in motion all that is needed to secure your freedom. Trust Father Aldrich implicitly. He will guide you when the moment arrives. Know this, whatever you may have been told, you are not forgotten. You are not disgraced. And if you will allow it, I intend to prove this truth to you and to the world. Your servant in this and all things, Darien Valacrest." Tears spilled onto the parchment, blurring the ink. For 5 years, Mariel had believed herself abandoned by God and man alike. Now, a virtual stranger offered salvation, but was it truly salvation he offered, or merely a different kind of captivity? Outside, the wind rose, rattling the narrow window of her cell. Mariel moved to secure the latch and gasped. In the courtyard below, shadows moved with purpose. Men in dark cloaks, led by a tall figure she instantly recognized. The Duke had not waited for dawn. He was here now, challenging the very walls that had held her prisoner. A commotion erupted, raised voices, the abbesses among them sharp with outrage. Then another voice, authoritative and resonant, silenced all others. "By order of His Excellency, Bishop Thornwald, this proceeding is halted." Mariel pressed herself against the cold stone wall, heart pounding. Footsteps echoed up the spiral staircase, leading to the novices' cells. A key turned in her lock, not the usual gentle motion of Sister Magdalene, but a forceful twist. The door swung open to reveal Abbess Vane, her face white with fury, a cluster of official-looking men behind her. "It seems, Sister Mariel," she said, her voice brittle as winter ice, "that your past has come to claim you." One of the men stepped forward, an elderly cleric wearing the insignia of the bishop's office. "Miss Thorne," he said kindly, "I am Archdeacon Mercer. His Grace the Duke of Valcrest has brought serious allegations regarding your circumstances here. The bishop requests your presence in the chapter house immediately." Mariel stood frozen, unable to move or speak. This moment, dreamed of in the darkest corners of her heart, now terrified her with its sudden reality. "Come, child," the archdeacon encouraged, extending a wrinkled hand. "No harm shall come to you." Behind him, another figure stepped into view, tall, commanding, his grey eyes finding hers instantly across the space between them. "Miss Thorne," the Duke said formally, though his gaze conveyed so much more. "If you wish to remain here, none shall force you to leave. But if you desire freedom, I stand ready to escort you to it." The abbess made a sound of contempt. "Freedom? You offer her the world's corruption after years of holy sanctuary?" "I offer her truth," the Duke replied, never looking away from Mariel. "And choice, something she was denied when sent here against her will." Marielle's fingers sought her amber cord, drawing strength from its smooth surface. 5 years of prayers, penance, and pain had taught her patience, but had never extinguished the flame of her true self. With surprising steadiness, she found her voice at last. "I would hear what His Excellency the Bishop has to say," she declared, lifting her chin, "and I would know the truth of my past, whatever it may be." She stepped forward, past the seething abbess, toward the man who had traveled so far to find her. As their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a promise. And for the first time since entering St. Lisa's gates, Mariel Thorne felt the stirrings of hope. The chapter house of St. Lisa's stood silent as a tomb despite the congregation within. Ancient stone walls, which had witnessed centuries of devotion, now bore witness to a most unusual tribunal. Torchlight cast long shadows across the faces of those assembled, the bishop's representatives, solemn and watchful, the convent's senior sisters, rigid with disapproval, and at the center, Mariel Thorne, still dressed in her novice's habit, but somehow transformed by the events of the past hours. Bishop Thornwald himself, a man of 70 years with eyes that missed nothing, sat in the abbess's chair. Beside him stood Duke Veilcrest, his tall figure emanating controlled power. "Let us proceed," the bishop announced, his voice resonating through the vaulted chamber. "We are gathered to examine serious allegations regarding the circumstances of Miss Mariel Thorne's residence at St. Lisa's Convent." Abbess Vane stepped forward, her hands clasped before her. "Your Excellency, this is most irregular. The girl came to us willingly after her disgrace." "Did she?" The Duke's voice cut through the abbess's protest like a blade. "I have here sworn testimonies suggesting otherwise." He produced a leather folio, from which he withdrew several documents bearing official seals. Testimonies that indicate Miss Thorne was coerced into entering religious life to conceal a family scandal, one that evidence now proves was fabricated. A murmur rippled through the assembled witnesses. Marielle felt the weight of every gaze upon her, but found herself drawn only to the Duke's unwavering presence. He stood as her champion, yet she barely knew him beyond this day. The bishop examined the documents carefully, his expression grave. "These papers suggest a disturbing conspiracy, Your Grace, but I must hear from Miss Thorne herself." He turned kind eyes to Mariel. "My child, tell us how you came to St. Lisa's. Speak freely without fear." Mariel took a deep breath, her fingers instinctively finding the amber cord at her wrist. For 5 years she had buried her story beneath layers of shame and penance. Now truth demanded voice. "I was 16, she began, her voice soft but clear in the hushed chamber. "My father arranged a match with Lord Roland Thorne, my cousin, who stood to inherit considerable property adjacent to our own. But she faltered, the memory still painful. "I could not bring myself to accept. There was something in his manner that frightened me." The Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Continue, Miss Thorne." "One evening, after I had once again begged my father to reconsider the match, I retired to the library. I must have fallen asleep reading, for when I awoke—" Her voice trembled. "Lord Roland was there, his clothing dishevelled, calling for the servants. My father entered to find us alone, and Roland claimed I had invited his advances." "A lie," the Duke stated flatly. "Yes," Marielle whispered, "but one I had no way to disprove." Within a day it was decided I would enter the convent to avoid further scandal. I was told it was God's will, my penance for bringing shame upon my family. Bishop Thornwald's expression darkened. "And at no time did you freely choose the religious life?" "I chose obedience, Your Excellency." Mariel met his gaze steadily, as I had been taught was a daughter's duty. Father Alderic stepped forward. "If I may speak, Your Excellency." At the bishop's nod, he continued. "I have served as confessor to this child for 5 years. Never once has she expressed a true vocation. She has served dutifully, but without the divine calling that makes such service a joy rather than a sentence." The abbess made a sound of disapproval. "Sentiments can be deceptive, Father. Many novices struggle before finding true commitment." "Perhaps," the bishop agreed, "but true vocation cannot be forced, nor can valid vows be taken under coercion." He turned to the Duke. "You mentioned evidence of the lady's innocence?" The Duke withdrew another document from his folio. "Lord Roland Thorne kept detailed accounts of his schemes, including his plot against Miss Thorne when she rejected his suit. Upon his recent death, these papers came to light among his effects." He passed the document to the bishop. "You will note the dates and particulars align precisely with Miss Thorne's account." As the bishop read, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "This is most disturbing indeed," He looked up at Marielle, compassion evident in his weathered face. "My child, it appears a grave injustice has been done to you." Marielle felt tears threatening. "Is it truly possible? After all this time?" "More than possible," the Duke affirmed. "Your cousin's confession exists in his own hand. Your name can be, must be, cleared." The abbess stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "This changes nothing about her status here. She has taken preliminary vows based on a lie," the Duke countered, a dangerous edge to his voice. "Vows she was coerced into preparing for." The bishop held up a hand for silence. "The Church does not recognize vows taken under false pretense or coercion." He turned to Marielle. "Miss Thorne, I ask you plainly, do you feel called to religious life? Is it your free choice to remain at St. Lysa's?" The question hung in the air like incense. Marielle felt the weight of 5 years pressing upon her. Years of silent service, of prayers that brought no peace, of dreams abandoned. "I have tried, Your Excellency," she answered honestly. "I have prayed for such a calling. But," her voice grew stronger, "my heart has never found its home within these walls." The bishop nodded slowly. "Then it is my judgment that you are free to leave this place with the Church's blessing and without stain upon your character." He fixed the abbess with a stern glance. "Reverend Mother, you will provide Miss Thorne with her personal effects and whatever items she brought to the convent. She departs at first light tomorrow." Relief washed over Marielle like spring rain, yet with it came terror. The convent had been her prison, but also her protection. What awaited her in the world she had left behind? As if sensing her thoughts, the Duke spoke. "Miss Thorne will not depart unprotected, Your Excellency. I have made arrangements for her care and rehabilitation into society, if she will accept my assistance." The bishop studied the Duke thoughtfully. "Your interest in this matter is commendable, Your Grace. May I inquire as to its nature?" For the first time, the Duke appeared less than completely composed. "I made a promise, Your Excellency, to her mother, through my father. But beyond that," his eyes met Marielle's across the chamber, "beyond that, I believe justice demands no less." In that moment, something passed between them, a current of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. "Very well," the bishop declared. "Let preparations be made. This tribunal is concluded." As the assembly dispersed, Marielle remained rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her fortunes. Freedom, long dreamed of but never truly expected, now stood before her, embodied in the tall figure of a duke she barely knew. "Miss Thorne," he said quietly, approaching her, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" With the bishop's permission, they stepped into a small antechamber, Father Alderic discreetly positioning himself by the door as chaperone. "You are trembling," the Duke observed, concern etching his features. "Forgiveness, Your Grace," Marielle whispered. "It is only that I have nowhere to go, no family who will receive me, no home to return to." "You are mistaken," he replied gently. "If you will permit it, I have prepared a place for you, a cottage on my estate where you may reside under the chaperonage of my aunt, Lady Hartwell. There you can recover your strength and decide your future at your own pace." Marielle looked up at him in wonder. "Why would you do this? You owe me nothing." The Duke's expression softened. "Perhaps not, but I believe some debts transcend obligation. Your mother was kind to mine during her final illness, and you—" He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. "You have endured an injustice I cannot abide. Will you accept my help, Miss Thorne?" In his grey eyes, Marielle saw something she had not encountered in 5 long years. Respect. Not pity, not condemnation, but the recognition of her worth as a person. "Yes," she answered simply, "I will." Dawn broke over St. Lisa's in ribbons of pearl and gold, as if nature itself celebrated Marielle's impending liberation. She stood in her cell one last time, changed from her novice's habit into the single gown that had been preserved from her arrival, a simple blue dress, now loose on her frame after years of convent austerity. A soft knock preceded Sister Elitha's entrance, her young face alight with barely contained excitement. "He's here," she whispered. "The Duke's carriage awaits in the courtyard, and oh, Marielle, it's the grandest thing I've ever seen." Marielle smiled at the novice's enthusiasm. "Thank you for your kindness these years, Elitha. I shall not forget it." The girl impulsively embraced her. "I shall pray for your happiness. We all will, except perhaps the abbess," she added with a mischievous glint. With a last glance at the sparse cell that had been her world, Marielle gathered her meager belongings. The blue dress she now wore, a prayer book, a small wooden comb, and of course the amber cord forever at her wrist. Father Alderic waited to escort her down the winding stone stairs. "Are you ready, my child?" "I believe so," Marielle replied, though her heart fluttered like a captured bird. "Father, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "The Duke, what manner of man is he truly? Beyond his title and wealth?" The priest considered her question carefully. "Darian Veilcrest is a man of principle, sometimes to the point of rigidity. He demands much of himself and those who serve him." A smile warmed his weathered face, but there is compassion in him too, though he guards it closely. His tenants prosper, his servants are loyal, and his word, once given, is inviolable. They had reached the courtyard, where the Duke's carriage indeed stood waiting, a magnificent conveyance of polished mahogany and gleaming brass, drawn by 4 matched grey horses. Beside it, mounted on a stallion black as midnight, was the Duke himself. He dismounted as she appeared, handing the reins to a liveried groom. "Miss Thorne," he greeted her with a formal bow, "I trust you rested well?" The question seemed almost absurd given the circumstances, yet his solicitude touched her. "As well as one might expect, Your Grace." Bishop Thornwald approached then, his official robes lending gravity to the moment. "Miss Thorne, before you depart, I wish to offer the Church's deepest apologies for the injustice you have suffered. Know that you leave here with your honor intact and our blessing upon your future." Marielle curtsied, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Your Excellency." The bishop turned to the Duke. "Your Grace, I entrust this lady to your protection. I need not remind a man of your standing of the responsibility this entails." "Indeed not, Your Excellency," the Duke replied, his tone solemn. "Miss Thorne's welfare shall be my foremost concern." From the shadows of the cloisters emerged Abbess Vane, her face set in lines of disapproval. "Remember, girl," she said coldly, "the world beyond these walls is filled with temptation and sin. Perhaps one day you will return to us, seeking the peace only true penance can provide." Before Marielle could respond, the Duke stepped forward. "Reverend Mother," he said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones, "Miss Thorne has endured more than enough false penance. Should she ever seek sanctuary again, it will not be within these walls." The abbess paled at his rebuke but said nothing more. With a gentle hand, the Duke guided Marielle toward the carriage. "My aunt awaits us at Vallecrest Manor," he explained, as a footman opened the door. "Lady Hartwell has prepared everything for your comfort." As Marielle settled onto plush velvet cushions, a luxury almost forgotten, she gazed out at St. Lysa's imposing facade. For 5 years those stone walls had contained her entire existence. Now they diminished with each turn of the carriage wheels. The Duke mounted his horse once more, positioning himself alongside her window. "The journey to Veilcrest takes approximately 4 hours," he informed her. "We shall stop midway for refreshment. If you require anything before then, simply inform my driver." She nodded, still overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. As the carriage passed through the convent gates for the last time, Marielle felt tears threatening. "Forgive me," she whispered, more to herself than to her benefactor. "I had resigned myself to never seeing the outside world again. It is rather overwhelming." The Duke's expression softened. "There is nothing to forgive, Miss Thorne. Adjustments require time. You have shown remarkable courage thus far." Their journey continued through rolling countryside, resplendent in spring finery. Fields of vibrant green stretched to meet cloudless sky, while hedgerows burst with early blossoms. After the convent's confined perspectives, the sheer vastness of the landscape made Marielle dizzy. When they stopped at a roadside inn for refreshment, the Duke helped her from the carriage with careful courtesy. "The Blue Heron is known for its excellent fare," he explained, escorting her inside. "My family has patronized it for generations." The innkeeper greeted them with obvious deference. "Your Grace, what an honor! Your usual private parlor is prepared, of course." Within minutes, Marielle found herself seated before a table laden with more food than she had seen in years. Freshly baked bread, cold roast chicken, spring vegetables in butter, and a bowl of strawberries so red they seemed almost impossible. "Please," the Duke encouraged, noting her hesitation, "eat whatever appeals to you. Convent fare is notoriously austere." Marielle selected a strawberry, its sweetness exploding on her tongue like a forgotten memory. "My mother grew strawberries," she found herself saying, "in a small garden behind our house. We would pick them together on summer mornings." Something like pleasure warmed the Duke's grey eyes. "Lady Elaine mentioned that garden in her letters to my father. She wrote most eloquently of its beauty and of her pride in her daughter who helped tend it." Marielle looked up sharply. "You have my mother's letters?" "Several," he confirmed, They are among your possessions that were preserved. My father rescued them when your family's estate was sold." Fresh pain lanced through her at the reminder. "Everything is gone, then? Our home, her garden?" "The property, yes," he acknowledged gently. "But not everything was lost. There is a trunk of personal items awaiting you at Valecrest, keepsakes my father secured before your cousin could dispose of them." Tears threatened once more. "Your father must have held my mother in great esteem." "They were dear friends from childhood," the Duke replied. "When she married your father, and my father wed my mother, the friendship continued between families. Until," he hesitated, "until my disgrace severed all connections," Marielle finished quietly. The Duke's expression hardened. "No, Miss Thorne, until your cousin's treachery and your father's weakness allowed a grave injustice to occur. The severing was not of your making." They finished their meal in contemplative silence before resuming their journey. As the carriage rolled onward, Marielle found her anxiety gradually yielding to exhaustion. The emotional turbulence of the past day, combined with her first substantial meal in years, soon lulled her towards slumber. She fought against heavy eyelids, unwilling to appear ungrateful or improper, but the Duke noticed her struggle. "Rest, Miss Thorne," he said kindly. "The road to Valecrest is well maintained but long. I shall wake you when we approach the estate." Permission granted, Marielle allowed herself to drift into the first truly peaceful sleep she had known in 5 years, the gentle rocking of the carriage carrying her toward an uncertain but suddenly hopeful future. Valecrest Manor appeared like a vision from another world, a grand edifice of pale stone rising majestically from meticulously landscaped grounds. As the carriage approached along a sweeping drive lined with ancient oaks, Marielle gazed in wonder at what would be her temporary home. "It's beautiful," she breathed, unconsciously pressing her palm against the carriage window. The Duke, who had dismounted to ride alongside, inclined his head at the compliment. "The east wing dates from Tudor times, though the main house was rebuilt after a fire in my grandfather's day." Marielle noted servants assembling on the broad steps leading to the entrance, their livery immaculate, their posture expectant. "They've gathered to welcome you." "And you," he corrected. "Word of your arrival has preceded us. I should warn you, Miss Thorne, that my aunt is something of an enthusiast when it comes to projects, as she calls them." Before Marielle could inquire further, the carriage halted and the door swung open. The Duke offered his hand, which she accepted with cautious gratitude, stepping down onto the gravel drive. A distinguished woman of perhaps 60 years detached herself from the receiving line and approached with regal bearing. Her silver-streaked hair was arranged fashionably beneath a cap of Brussels lace, and her eyes, the same remarkable grey as the Duke's, sparkled with undisguised interest. "So this is your rescued maiden, Darian," she declared, inspecting Marielle with frank appraisal. Good bone structure, excellent posture, despite those dreadful convent years. Yes, I believe we shall manage splendidly." The Duke cleared his throat. "Aunt Lavinia, may I present Miss Marielle Thorne? Miss Thorne, my father's sister, Lady Hartwell." Marielle curtsied as gracefully as her limited practice allowed. "I am honored to make your acquaintance, Lady Hartwell, and most grateful for your hospitality." Lady Hartwell's face softened. "The honor is mine, my dear. Any daughter of Elaine Thorne is welcome at Valecrest." She linked her arm through Marielle's. "Now you must be exhausted after such an ordeal. Let me show you to your quarters. I've had the blue suite prepared. It has the loveliest morning light." As they ascended the steps, the Duke called after them, "Aunt, perhaps Miss Thorne might wish to rest before dinner?" Lady Hartwell waved a dismissive hand. "Of course she shall rest. Do you imagine I mean to parade the poor girl about immediately? Really, Darian, for such a clever man, you can be remarkably obtuse about female necessities." Marielle glanced back to see the Duke's lips twitch in what might have been amusement before he turned to confer with his steward. Inside, Valecrest Manor revealed itself as both grand and surprisingly inviting. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rich carpets and elegant furnishings that somehow avoided ostentation. "The family portraits are in the long gallery," Lady Hartwell explained as they ascended a sweeping staircase. "Frightfully dull ancestors, most of them, though Darian's father was a handsome devil in his youth, much like our current Duke, though he'd throttle me for saying so." Marielle found herself warming to the older woman's direct manner. After years of careful silences and veiled meanings at the convent, such frankness felt refreshingly honest. The blue suite proved to be a set of connecting rooms decorated in various shades of azure and cream. A sitting room opened into a bedchamber dominated by a magnificent canopied bed, beyond which lay a dressing room, and private bathing chamber. "I hope it will serve," Lady Hartwell said, watching Marielle's overwhelmed expression. "The cottage Darian mentioned is being prepared, but it requires some refurbishment. You'll stay here until it's ready, unless you prefer it here. You're welcome to remain at the manor indefinitely, you know." Marielle turned in a slow circle, taking in the opulence around her. "This is far more than I expected, my lady. I wouldn't wish to impose—" "Nonsense! Valecrest has 38 bedchambers. It's positively indecent for Darian and me to rattle about the place alone." Lady Hartwell rang for a maid, who appeared so promptly she must have been waiting just outside. "This is Agnes. She'll be your lady's maid during your stay." The maid, a pleasant-faced young woman, curtsied. "Welcome to Valecrest, miss. I've taken the liberty of ordering some suitable garments," Lady Hartwell continued. "Nothing elaborate yet, just some basic necessities until we can have a proper wardrobe commissioned." Mariel touched her faded blue dress self-consciously. "You're very kind, my lady, but I cannot accept such generosity. I have no means to repay—" "Did my nephew not explain?" Lady Hartwell interrupted, looking genuinely surprised. "My dear girl, you are not here as a charity case. You are here as the daughter of Elaine Thorne, to whom this family owes a debt that cannot be repaid with mere clothing and shelter." Seeing Mariel's confusion, the older woman's expression softened. "Perhaps you should rest now. We dine at 8. Agnes will help you prepare and escort you downstairs." With a reassuring pat to Marielle's hand, Lady Hartwell swept from the room, leaving only the lingering scent of lavender water behind. Left alone with Agnes, Marielle found herself suddenly overcome. 5 years of rigid control crumbled as the enormity of the day's events crashed over her. "Oh, miss," Agnes said gently, guiding her to a chair as tears began to fall. "It's all right. You're safe now." "I don't understand," Marielle managed between quiet sobs. "Why would they do this for me? The Duke hardly knows me. Lady Hartwell never met me before today." Agnes offered a handkerchief. "If you'll pardon me saying so, miss, His Grace is known for his sense of justice. When he believes a wrong has been done, he doesn't rest until it's put right." She began preparing a bath as she spoke. "As for Lady Hartwell, she and your mother were schoolmates, I believe." "Truly?" Marielle dabbed at her eyes, composure gradually returning. "Indeed, miss. Now shall we get you bathed and rested? A few hours' sleep will help restore your spirits." The bath proved heavenly, scented with rose oil, hot enough to soothe muscles tense from years of hard work and sparse comfort. Afterward, Agnes helped her into a nightdress of fine lawn, softer than anything Marielle had worn in memory. As she slipped between sheets of crisp linen, exhaustion claimed her once more. Yet before sleep took her completely, Marielle found her thoughts returning to the Duke, to his unwavering determination, his dignified anger on her behalf, and the surprising gentleness behind his formal manner. She had expected freedom to feel triumphant. Instead, it felt vulnerable, a vast unknown territory after years of rigid certainty. The only anchors in this new existence were the amber cord at her wrist and the unexpected kindness of near strangers who somehow believed in her worth. With that thought, Marielle surrendered to slumber, her last conscious awareness being a prayer, not the rote petitions of convent life, but a simple, heartfelt thanksgiving for delivery from darkness into light. Marielle awoke to unfamiliar birdsong and sunlight streaming through partially drawn curtains. For a disorienting moment, she thought herself back in her family home, before memories of convent walls and then yesterday's extraordinary events rushed back. She was at Valecrest Manor, rescued by a duke she barely knew, lying in a bed more luxurious than any she had ever known. A soft knock preceded Agnes's entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, miss. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in years," Marielle admitted, sitting up against plump pillows. "What time is it?" "Just past 9, miss. Lady Hartwell thought it best to let you rest." Agnes set down the tray and moved to draw the curtains fully. "His Grace has been up since dawn, but Lady Hartwell rarely appears before 10. The breakfast tray held delicacies Marielle had almost forgotten existed: freshly baked rolls with butter and honey, sliced fruits, a pot of chocolate. After years of thin porridge and stale bread, such abundance seemed almost sinful. "I've laid out a day dress for when you're ready," Agnes continued, opening the wardrobe to reveal several gowns in modest but fashionable styles. "Lady Hartwell sent to the village dressmaker yesterday. These are ready-made pieces she adjusted overnight. Proper gowns will take time, of course." Marielle touched the sleeve of a moss-green muslin, marveling at its softness. "It's overwhelming. I've worn nothing but a novice's habit for so long." "If I may say so, miss, the green will complement your eyes beautifully." Once dressed, with her chestnut hair arranged in a simple but elegant style, Marielle hardly recognized her reflection. The gaunt, shadowed face of the convent had begun to yield to something softer, more alive. Agnes escorted her downstairs, through corridors adorned with priceless artwork and ancient tapestries. They encountered no one until reaching a sunny morning room where Lady Hartwell sat writing letters. "Ah, there you are, my dear." The older woman set aside her pen. "I trust you slept well. You certainly look more refreshed. Green suits you admirably." "Thank you, my lady." Marielle curtsied. "For everything, the clothes, the room, your kindness." Lady Hartwell waved away her gratitude. "Nonsense. Now Darian has been pacing the terrace for the past hour, pretending to read correspondence but actually watching for your appearance. Shall we put him out of his misery?" Before Marielle could respond, Lady Hartwell had risen and led her through French doors onto a stone terrace overlooking spectacular formal gardens. The Duke stood at the balustrade, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. He turned at their approach, and Marielle saw something flicker in his expression, surprise perhaps, or appreciation, before his features composed into their usual reserve. "Good morning, Miss Thorne," he greeted her, bowing formally. "I trust you found your accommodations comfortable." "Exceedingly so, Your Grace. I am most grateful." Lady Hartwell rolled her eyes. "Goodness, such ceremony. Darian, the girl isn't a foreign diplomat. Miss Thorne, my nephew may appear forbidding, but I assure you he can manage civil conversation without titles when the occasion warrants." A hint of colour touched the Duke's cheekbones. "Aunt Lavinia, perhaps Miss Thorne might enjoy seeing the gardens. The spring blossoms are at their peak." "An excellent suggestion." Lady Hartwell smiled slyly. "Though I suddenly recall correspondence requiring my attention. You wouldn't mind escorting Miss Thorne yourself, would you, Darian?" The Duke offered his arm to Marielle. "It would be my honor if Miss Thorne is amenable." Marielle placed her hand lightly on his sleeve, acutely aware of the impropriety such contact would have represented in her previous life. "I should like that very much, Your Grace." They descended marble steps into a garden that rivaled Eden. Stone pathways wound between beds of tulips and narcissi, while ancient trees provided dappled shade. In the distance, a fountain sparkled in the sunlight. "It's magnificent," Marielle breathed, "like something from a painting." "My mother designed much of it," the Duke explained, his voice warming slightly. "She had a particular gift for creating natural harmony." As they walked, Marielle sensed he wished to speak of something specific, but was hesitant to begin. She waited patiently, accustomed to silence from her convent years. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Miss Thorne, there is a matter we must discuss regarding your future." Her heart quickened with apprehension. "Yes, Your Grace. I have taken certain steps toward restoring your reputation and securing your position in society." He led her to a stone bench beneath a flowering cherry tree. "With your permission, I intend to make public the evidence of your cousin's treachery and your subsequent wrongful confinement." Marielle sat very still, watching petals drift down around them. "To what end, Your Grace?" "Justice," he replied simply. "Your name has been tarnished by lies. It deserves to be cleared by truth." "And if I prefer to leave the past buried?" she asked softly. 5 years have passed. Society has forgotten me." His grey eyes studied her with surprising gentleness. "Forgotten, perhaps, but not erased. You deserve the opportunity to reclaim your place if you wish it." "My place," she repeated. "I'm not certain such a thing exists anymore. My family home is sold, my father remarried and living abroad, my reputation in tatters. Your reputation can be restored." The Duke's voice carried absolute conviction. "As for your circumstances, my aunt and I have discussed this at length. We propose that you remain at Valcrest, under her chaperonage, while we reintroduce you to society gradually." Marielle looked down at her hands, so long occupied with prayer books and illuminated manuscripts, now resting in the lap of a gown finer than any she had owned before her disgrace. "Why would you do this? You have fulfilled any obligation to my mother by rescuing me from St. Lisa's." For the first time, the Duke seemed at a loss for words. He rose, taking a few steps away before turning back to face her. "Miss Thorne, Marielle," he said, using her given name for the first time, "what was done to you offends everything I hold sacred. Truth, justice, honor. I cannot rest while the architects of your suffering remain unpunished, and your own life remains diminished by their actions. Justice for me seems to consume you," she observed quietly. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability quickly masked. "Perhaps I recognize the pain of false judgment. My own mother was similarly condemned by society, though her only crime was marrying beneath her station for love." This revelation, so personal, so unexpected, left Marielle momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, a manservant appeared on the terrace above. "Your Grace," he called, "Lord Hatherton has arrived and requests an immediate audience." The Duke straightened, his moment of openness passing. "Inform him I shall be there directly." He turned back to Marielle with obvious reluctance. "Forgive me. Lord Hatherton is my solicitor and has been assisting with your case." "Of course," she murmured, rising from the bench. "I understand." He hesitated, then asked, "Will you consider my proposal to remain at Valcrest while we work to restore your good name?" Marielle looked up at him, this man who had upended his life to right a wrong done to her. "Yes, Your Grace, I will consider it." His face brightened momentarily. "Excellent. We shall speak more on this later." With a formal bow he departed, leaving Marielle alone amid falling cherry blossoms. She remained in the garden, thoughts whirling like the petals around her. The Duke's intensity both intrigued and unsettled her. His determination to restore her reputation spoke of a rigid moral code, yet there was something more in his manner when he looked at her, something she dared not name, even to herself. After 5 years believing herself worthless, Marielle found it difficult to accept that anyone, let alone someone of the Duke's standing, would invest such effort in her redemption, yet his sincerity seemed unquestionable. As she pondered these matters, Lady Hartwell appeared on the path, a knowing smile playing about her lips. "I see my nephew has abandoned you for his solicitor," she remarked, joining Marielle on the bench. "Typical man, always placing business before pleasure." Marielle blushed. "His Grace has been most attentive. He spoke of plans to restore my reputation." "Ah yes, his grand crusade." Lady Hartwell nodded. "Darian has been quite single-minded about your case since discovering those papers among your cousin's effects. I've never seen him so passionate about a matter of justice." "I cannot comprehend why," Marielle admitted. "Surely a duke has more pressing concerns than a disgraced woman he barely knows." Lady Hartwell studied her thoughtfully. "My dear, sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind does not yet understand. But come, I've arranged for the dressmaker to visit this afternoon. We must prepare you for society, whether you choose to re-enter it or not." As they walked back toward the house, Marielle glanced up at the windows, wondering which one concealed the Duke and his solicitor, planning her future with the same methodical determination that had secured her freedom. A fortnight passed at Valcrest Manor, with the dreamlike quality of a fairy tale. Each day brought Marielle new wonders as she slowly reacquainted herself with the world beyond convent walls. Lady Hartwell proved a patient guide, reintroducing her to the social graces she had all but forgotten: proper table etiquette, the intricacies of morning calls, the subtle language of fans and flowers. The Duke remained a more enigmatic presence. Though unfailingly courteous, he spent much of his time in London, returning late in the evenings for solitary hours in his study. When they did converse, it was most often about practical matters concerning her rehabilitation. "Lord Hatherton has filed formal petitions with the courts," he informed her one evening as they sat in the drawing-room after dinner. "Your cousin's estate will be required to make restitution for the false claims that led to your confinement." Marielle looked up from her embroidery, a skill Lady Hartwell had insisted she revive. "Restitution. I seek no financial compensation, Your Grace. It is not merely financial," he explained. "The legal finding will officially declare your innocence. Without it, rumors might persist." Lady Hartwell, who had been pretending to read while eavesdropping shamelessly, set down her book. "Darian is right, my dear. Society requires official pronouncements to believe anything, particularly when it contradicts cherished gossip." The Duke nodded. "Once the court's declaration is made, we can proceed with your reintroduction to society. I've spoken with the Countess of Merewood, who has agreed to sponsor you at her midsummer ball." Marielle felt a flutter of panic. "A ball? Your Grace, I cannot possibly—" "You absolutely can," Lady Hartwell interrupted firmly. "And you shall. 3 weeks remain before the event, ample time for preparation." The Duke studied Marielle with unusual perception. "You are uncomfortable with the idea, Miss Thorne? After 5 years in seclusion, the prospect of facing society's scrutiny is daunting," she admitted. "I fear I shall disappoint your efforts on my behalf." A rare smile softened his features. "That would be impossible, Miss Thorne. You have already shown more courage than most display in a lifetime." Such moments of warmth from him had become increasingly frequent, though always brief, like sun breaking through clouds before disappearing again. They left Marielle confused and strangely breathless. That night, unable to sleep, She wandered to her sitting-room window. The gardens below lay silvered in moonlight, peaceful yet somehow expectant. A movement caught her eye. A tall figure walking alone along the terrace, head bowed in apparent thought. The Duke. Even at a distance she would know him anywhere. As if sensing her gaze, he stopped and looked up. For a suspended moment their eyes met across the distance. He raised a hand in silent acknowledgment before continuing his solitary walk. Marielle returned to bed with her thoughts in greater turmoil than before. She was developing feelings for her benefactor, feelings that went beyond appropriate gratitude. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. The following morning brought a surprise visitor. Marielle was reading in the library when Agnes announced, "Father Aldrich to see you, miss." The kindly priest entered, his face creasing in a warm smile. "Miss Thorne, how well you look, quite transformed from our last meeting." "Father Aldrich," Marielle greeted him joyfully. "What brings you to Valcrest?" "His Grace invited me," the priest explained, taking the seat she offered. "He thought you might appreciate a familiar face as you adjust to your new circumstances." They spoke easily of her life at Valcrest, her improving health, Lady Hartwell's kindness. But Marielle sensed the priest had more to discuss. "There is another reason for my visit," he eventually admitted. "I bring news that may distress you, though perhaps it should not." Marielle set aside her teacup. "What news, Father?" "Your father has written to the convent, inquiring after you. It seems word of your departure has reached him abroad." A dull ache formed in Marielle's chest. "After 5 years of silence, he suddenly remembers my existence?" Father Aldrich sighed. "I believe guilt is a powerful motivator, my child. His letter expressed regret for his hasty judgment. Did the abbess inform him of my whereabouts?" "She would have, had she known them." A twinkle appeared in the priest's amber eyes. "Fortunately, I intercepted the correspondence. I told him only that you had been released into honorable protection, as evidence had emerged clearing your name." Marielle twisted the amber cord at her wrist. "And his response?" "He has booked passage from Italy. He intends to seek reconciliation." The news struck Marielle like a physical blow. Her father, who had believed the worst of her, who had abandoned her to a living death without investigation, now sought forgiveness. "I am not ready to see him," she whispered. Father Aldrich nodded understandingly. "No one will force such a meeting, my child. His Grace has made that abundantly clear. The Duke knows of this." "Indeed. He received correspondence from your father directly, requesting your location. His Grace replied that any communication must be conducted through Lord Hatherton until you yourself grant permission for direct contact." Marielle felt a surge of gratitude for the Duke's protective instinct. "He seems to anticipate every contingency." "He is determined that you never again suffer injustice," Father Aldrich agreed, "though I suspect his motivations extend beyond mere justice." Before Marielle could question this cryptic observation, the library door opened to admit the Duke himself. He stopped short at seeing Father Aldrich. "Forgive the intrusion," he said formally. "I was not aware you had company, Miss Thorne." Father Aldrich rose. "Not at all, Your Grace. I was just informing Miss Thorne of recent developments." "Regarding her father, I presume?" The Duke's expression hardened slightly. "I hope you assured her that she is under no obligation to receive him." "I did indeed," the priest confirmed, "though ultimately such decisions rest with Miss Thorne alone." The Duke's gaze shifted to Marielle. "Of course, I would never presume to dictate your choices in this or any matter." Something in his tone made her wonder if they were still discussing her father. "Thank you, Your Grace. Your consideration has been extraordinary." Father Aldrich glanced between them, a knowing look crossing his features. "I should take my leave. The bishop expects me back by evening." After the priest's departure, the Duke remained, seemingly reluctant to leave Marielle alone with her thoughts. "Your father's reappearance must be unsettling," he ventured at last. Marielle moved to the library window, gazing out at the gardens without really seeing them. 5 years of silence, then suddenly he seeks reconciliation when my name is to be cleared. The timing seems convenient. You suspect mercenary motives. I don't know what to suspect anymore." She turned back to face him. "I once believed him incapable of sending me away as he did. Now I find myself questioning everything I thought I knew." The Duke approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "If I may offer an observation, Miss Thorne, sometimes people act against their better nature when influenced by stronger personalities. Your cousin appears to have been most persuasive in his deceptions." "You defend my father?" Marielle asked, surprised. "I merely suggest that human weakness does not always equate to malice. Whether that merits your forgiveness is entirely your decision." His insight struck her forcefully. Despite his somewhat rigid exterior, the Duke possessed a nuanced understanding of human frailty. "You are wiser than your years would suggest, Your Grace." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Experience rather than wisdom, Miss Thorne. I have witnessed similar dynamics within my own family." Before she could respond, Lady Hartwell's voice called from the corridor. "Marielle, are you in the library? The modiste has arrived for your final fitting." The Duke stepped back. "I shall not keep you from such important matters." With a formal bow, he departed, leaving Marielle to ponder their conversation as she prepared for yet another step in her transformation from forgotten novice to restored gentlewoman. The day of the Countess of Merewood's midsummer ball arrived with alarming swiftness. As darkness fell across Valecrest Manor, Marielle stood before her mirror, scarcely recognizing the elegant young woman reflected there. Her gown, Lady Hartwell's most extravagant commission yet, was fashioned of pale green silk that shimmered like water with each movement. Cut modestly high in front in deference to her recent circumstances, it featured delicate embroidery that echoed the amber cord she still wore at her wrist, now artfully incorporated into her ensemble as if it were a deliberate accessory rather than a cherished memento. "You look absolutely enchanting," Lady Hartwell declared, entering the room in a rustle of dark blue taffeta. "Darian will be speechless when he sees you." Marielle blushed. "His Grace has seen me daily for weeks now." "Not like this, my dear." The older woman adjusted a curl that had escaped Marielle's carefully arranged coiffure. "Tonight, he will see you as London society will, a beautiful young woman of impeccable character, ready to reclaim her rightful place." Anxiety clutched at Marielle's stomach. What if I disgrace myself? It has been so long since I attended any social function. Nonsense. You've been practicing for weeks. Besides, the Countess has been briefed on your situation. She will ensure you are properly introduced and treated with respect. Lady Hartwell patted her cheek affectionately. "And Darian will remain at your side throughout the evening." This last assurance, meant to comfort, only increased Marielle's nervousness. The Duke's constant proximity would heighten her awareness of every potential misstep. When they descended the grand staircase, the Duke awaited them in the entrance hall. Resplendent in formal black evening wear, a single diamond pin glinting at his cravat, he looked every inch the aristocrat he was. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as they fell upon Marielle. "Miss Thorne," he said, bowing deeply, "you are the very picture of grace this evening." "Thank you, Your Grace," she replied, cursing her nervousness for the telltale flush she felt rising in her cheeks. Lady Hartwell watched their exchange with undisguised satisfaction. "Well, shall we proceed? The Countess's ball begins at 9, and it would not do to arrive unfashionably early." The journey to Merewood House passed in a blur of anxiety for Marielle. Lady Hartwell attempted to distract her with gossip about expected attendees, while the Duke remained quiet, occasionally offering reassurance with a glance or brief word. "Remember," he said as their carriage joined the queue approaching the Countess's magnificent London residence, "you have nothing to prove to these people. Your presence alone is triumph enough." Merewood House blazed with light, its grand facade illuminated by hundreds of lanterns. Footmen in elaborate livery assisted guests from carriages, while inside, strains of orchestra music beckoned invitingly. As they entered the grand ballroom, Marielle felt a momentary panic. After years of convent silence, the cacophony of music, laughter, and conversation overwhelmed her senses. The Duke, sensing her distress, placed her hand firmly upon his arm. "Breathe deeply," he murmured. "Focus only on what is before you." His steady presence anchored her as they made their way through the crowd toward their hostess. The Countess of Merewood, a handsome woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a genuine smile, greeted them warmly. "Miss Thorne, how delighted I am to make your acquaintance at last. Valecrest has spoken of you with such high regard." "You are most kind, Lady Merewood," Marielle responded, finding her social voice with surprising ease. "Not kind, perceptive," the Countess corrected, leaning closer. "Any young woman who has endured what you have and emerged with such dignity deserves society's admiration, not its censure." She patted Marielle's hand. "Now, shall we begin introductions? Several people are quite eager to meet you." What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign. With the Countess leading and the Duke hovering protectively nearby, Marielle was introduced to select individuals. An elderly duchess, whose approval could silence even the most vicious gossips. A cabinet minister's wife known for championing worthy causes, the editor of a fashionable ladies' journal. To Marielle's astonishment, she was received not with suspicion, but with interest and even warmth. Word of her story had preceded her, presented in the most sympathetic light, she suspected, by the Duke's careful management. "You are making quite an impression," he observed during a brief moment alone as they watched dancers whirl about the floor. "Thanks entirely to your preparations," Mariel replied, "and the Countess's endorsement." His grey eyes studied her with unusual intensity. "No, Miss Thorne. While those factors opened doors, it is your own grace that has impressed these people. You have conducted yourself with remarkable poise." Before she could respond, Lady Hartwell approached with a distinguished gentleman in tow. "Mariel, allow me to present Lord Kenilworth, an old friend of your mother's family." Lord Kenilworth bowed elegantly. "Miss Thorne, what a pleasure to see Elaine's daughter restored to society. You have her eyes, you know." Mariel smiled, touched by this connection to her mother. "You knew her well, my lord?" "Since childhood. We grew up on neighboring estates." His expression grew wistful. "She would be immensely proud of you tonight." As Lord Kenilworth engaged her in reminiscences about her mother, Mariel noticed the Duke watching them with an inscrutable expression. When the orchestra struck up a waltz, Lord Kenilworth extended his hand. "Might I claim this dance, Miss Thorne? For old time's sake. Your mother was my partner at her first ball, you know." Mariel hesitated, glancing toward the Duke. She had practiced dancing with Lady Hartwell, but had not yet attempted it in public. "Go on, my dear," Lady Hartwell encouraged. "Kenilworth is an excellent dancer. You'll be quite safe." With one last look at the Duke, whose expression had darkened slightly, Mariel accepted Lord Kenilworth's hand. He led her onto the floor with practiced ease, guiding her through the opening movements of the waltz. "You dance beautifully," he complimented her, "just like Elaine." "Thank you, my lord. Though I fear I am quite out of practice." "Nonsense, you move with natural grace." He glanced across the room to where the Duke stood watching them. "Valecrest has taken quite an interest in your case, I understand." "His Grace has been most generous," Mariel acknowledged carefully. Lord Kenilworth's eyes twinkled. "Indeed, most interesting given his usual reticence in social matters. The Tun has noticed, you know. There is already speculation about his intentions." Mariel nearly missed a step. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" The older man smiled kindly. "My dear, when the most eligible Duke in England dedicates himself to restoring a young lady's reputation, people inevitably wonder why." Before Mariel could formulate a response, the music ended. Lord Kenilworth returned her to Lady Hartwell's side with a courtly bow and a knowing smile. The Duke appeared moments later, his expression carefully controlled. "Are you fatigued, Miss Thorne? Perhaps some refreshment would be welcome." As they made their way toward the supper room, whispers and glances followed them. Mariel realized with sudden clarity that Lord Kenilworth had been right. Their every interaction was being observed and interpreted. "People are watching us," she murmured. "People are always watching," he replied dryly. "It is the curse of my position. And now, I have drawn their attention to you as well." The Duke paused, turning to face her directly. "Do you imagine I care for their idle speculation? My concern is only for your comfort." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. His grey eyes held an emotion she could not quite name, something beyond his usual protective determination. Before she could decipher it, a ripple of reaction moved through the nearby crowd. Following the Duke's suddenly rigid gaze, Mariel saw a man entering the ballroom, a man whose features, though lined with age and dissipation, were unnervingly familiar. "Father," she whispered, feeling as though the floor had suddenly tilted beneath her feet. The Duke's hand came to rest lightly at her elbow, steadying her. "He should not be here," he said, his voice low with controlled anger. "The Countess would never have invited him without consulting me first." "Perhaps he was another guest's companion," Mariel suggested, unable to tear her eyes from the man who had condemned her to 5 years of living death. Lord Thorne had not yet noticed them, but it was only a matter of time in the crowded ballroom. Mariel felt panic rising within her. She was not prepared for this confrontation, not tonight when everything had been going so surprisingly well. "Would you like to leave?" the Duke asked quietly. "I can have the carriage brought around immediately." His consideration touched her deeply. "No," she decided, drawing herself up. "I will not flee. I have done nothing wrong." A flash of admiration crossed his features. "As you wish, but you need not face him alone." "Thank you, Your Grace." Mariel took a steadying breath. "I believe I am ready." As if summoned by her words, Lord Thorne turned and saw them. His face paled, then flushed with emotion as he began making his way through the crowd toward them. The Duke's hand moved from her elbow to rest lightly against the small of her back, a gesture both protective and subtly possessive. Together, They stood their ground as Marielle's past approached to confront her present and perhaps determine her future. Lord Thorn approached with halting steps, his once proud bearing diminished by age and evident anxiety. His eyes, so like Marielle's own, darted between his daughter and the Duke, uncertainty written across features that had grown haggard in the years since she'd last seen him. "Marielle," he said, his voice barely carrying over the orchestra. "My child." The Duke's hand remained steady at Marielle's back, a silent reminder of his support. Around them, conversations hushed as nearby guests sensed the drama unfolding. "Father," Marielle acknowledged, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I did not expect to see you here." Lord Thorn glanced nervously at the Duke. "Your Grace, might I request a moment alone with my daughter?" "That is entirely Miss Thorn's decision," the Duke replied, his tone carrying the weight of his position. "I remain at her disposal." Marielle appreciated his deference to her wishes. "We may speak here, Father. His Grace has my complete confidence." Her father flinched at this evidence of estrangement, but nodded. "As you wish." He took a shaky breath. "Marielle, I have only recently learned of the grave injustice done to you. Roland's deception, my own unforgivable credulity. I cannot express the depth of my remorse." 5 years, Marielle said quietly. 5 years without a single letter, a single inquiry into my welfare. Lord Thorn's face crumpled. "I believed, God forgive me, I believed what Roland told me, that you had found peace in religious life, that you wished for no contact with the world that had witnessed your disgrace." He swallowed hard. "It was only upon his death, when certain papers came to light, that I began to suspect the truth." The Countess of Merewood materialized at their side, her social instincts alerting her to potential discord among her guests. "Lord Thorn, what a surprise. I don't recall sending you an invitation." He bowed awkwardly. "Forgive the intrusion, Lady Merewood. I accompanied the Barringtons. They mentioned Marielle would be present, and I could not forgo the opportunity to see her." The Countess's eyes narrowed. "While I appreciate a father's concern, perhaps such a reunion might have been arranged in more private circumstances." "Indeed it might," the Duke agreed, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, particularly given Miss Thorn's recent return to society. Marielle felt the eyes of the assembly upon them, the moment teetering toward public scandal, precisely what the Duke had worked so diligently to avoid. With sudden clarity, she understood what must be done. "Lady Merewood," she said, summoning the poise Lady Hartwell had cultivated in her, "might my father and I use your conservatory for a brief conversation? I assure you we shall not abuse your hospitality." The Countess's expression softened. "Of course, my dear, take all the time you need." Marielle turned to the Duke. "Your Grace, I would be grateful if you would accompany us." Relief flickered in his eyes, quickly masked by formal courtesy. "If you wish it." The conservatory stood empty, its lush greenery illuminated by strategically placed lanterns. The music from the ballroom filtered through faintly, creating a dreamlike atmosphere as Marielle faced the man who had once been the center of her world. "You look so like your mother," Lord Thorn said, his voice breaking. "Standing there in that green gown, it might be Elaine herself." "A comparison I do not deserve," Marielle replied. "Mother would never have abandoned her child on another's word." He flinched as if struck. "You are right, of course. Elaine possessed a strength I have always lacked." His gaze dropped to the amber cord at her wrist. "You still wear it. Her last gift to you." Marielle's fingers instinctively moved to touch the smooth beads. "The only possession I was permitted to keep." The Duke, who had positioned himself near enough to intervene if needed, while allowing them some semblance of privacy, spoke. "Lord Thorn, perhaps you might explain what you hope to accomplish by this unexpected appearance." Lord Thorn straightened slightly. "I seek my daughter's forgiveness, though I have no right to expect it, and," he hesitated, "I wish to make what amends I can for the years stolen from her." "Amends?" Marielle repeated. "I have settled a substantial sum upon you," her father explained. "Not as large as your rightful inheritance would have been, but enough to secure your independence. The papers await only your signature." The Duke's expression darkened. "Miss Thorn's financial security has already been arranged through legal proceedings against your nephew's estate. She has no need of belated charity." "It is not charity," Lord Thorn protested. "It is her due, what should have been hers all along." "And where was this concern for her due when you condemned her to St. Lysa's?" the Duke asked, his control slipping momentarily to reveal genuine anger. Marielle stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on the Duke's arm. "Your Grace, please." To her father she said, "What else do you want, Father? Surely you did not come merely to offer money." Lord Thorn seemed to age before their eyes. I want what any father wants. A chance to know my child again, to see you restored to your rightful place in the world. He glanced at the Duke. Though it seems his grace has already accomplished that far better than I could have. A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of years lost and trusts broken. Marielle studied the man before her, this diminished figure so different from the confident father of her childhood. She felt not the burning rage she had expected, but something more complex. Pity mingled with the last vestiges of filial devotion. "I cannot give you what you seek tonight," she said at last. 5 years cannot be erased by a single conversation or a settlement of funds. Lord Thorn's shoulders slumped. "I understand. However," Marielle continued, surprising herself with the words forming on her lips, "I am willing to consider correspondence. Perhaps in time, we might rebuild something of what was lost." Hope flickered in her father's eyes. "You would grant me that much? After all I've done or failed to do?" The Duke moved subtly closer to Marielle, his presence lending her strength. "She offers more clemency than many would in her position, Lord Thorn. I suggest you receive it with appropriate gratitude." "Indeed I do," Lord Thorn murmured, bowing deeply to his daughter. "More than gratitude, reverence for the strength of character you have shown despite my failings." He straightened, visibly collecting himself. "I shall not impose further on Lady Merewood's hospitality, but perhaps, might I call upon you when you are ready?" Marielle nodded. "Send word through Lord Hatherton. When I am prepared to receive you, he will inform you." Her father accepted this conditional olive branch with surprising dignity. "Thank you, Marielle. I shall await your convenience." He bowed once more, then to the Duke. "Your Grace, I entrust my daughter to your continued protection, which has proven far superior to my own." With those words he withdrew, leaving Marielle and the Duke alone amid the exotic blooms and trailing vines of the conservatory. "Are you unwell?" the Duke asked immediately, his formal restraint giving way to genuine concern. "That encounter must have been deeply distressing." Marielle drew a shaky breath. "I am surprised more than anything. I expected to feel rage upon seeing him. Instead, I felt," she searched for the right word, "emptiness, as though he were a stranger wearing a familiar face." "Time changes us all," the Duke observed quietly, "though seldom for the better in cases like your father's. He seems sincere in his remorse. Perhaps he is. Deathbed repentance often comes too late to benefit its object." Marielle looked at him sharply. "Is he ill?" The Duke's expression softened. "Forgive me, I spoke metaphorically. To my knowledge, your father enjoys reasonable health for his years." Relief flooded her, followed by confusion at having felt relief at all. Her emotions regarding her father remained tangled in ways she could scarcely comprehend. "Shall we return to the ballroom?" the Duke asked. "Or would you prefer to depart? No one would think less of you for withdrawing after such an encounter." Marielle considered the question seriously. Part of her longed to retreat to the safety of Valecrest, to process this unexpected meeting in solitude. Yet another part, a stronger part, rebelled at the thought of allowing her father's appearance to derail her first foray back into society. "I should like to remain," she decided, "if you are agreeable." Something like pride flickered in the Duke's eyes. "More than agreeable, Miss Thorn. I am honored by your fortitude." As they re-entered the ballroom, Marielle felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Word of her confrontation with Lord Thorn had clearly spread, but rather than censure, she encountered looks of sympathy and even admiration. The Countess approached immediately. "My dear, are you quite all right? I had no idea Lord Thorn would appear so precipitously." "I am well, thank you," Marielle assured her. "The conversation, while unexpected, was necessary. You handled it with remarkable composure," the Countess approved. "Now, I believe several gentlemen are most eager to claim a dance, if you are so inclined." Marielle glanced at the Duke, who inclined his head slightly. "I should be delighted, Lady Merewood." For the remainder of the evening, Marielle found herself surrounded by attentive partners and engaged in pleasant conversation. The story of her unjust confinement and subsequent vindication had transformed from potential scandal to romantic narrative in the minds of the ton, a transformation the Duke had clearly anticipated and carefully managed. It was near midnight when he finally claimed a dance for himself. As they took their positions for a waltz, Marielle felt a curious fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with anxiety. "You have triumphed this evening," he observed, guiding her through the opening steps with effortless grace. "Every person of consequence in this room has been charmed by you. If so, the credit belongs to you and Lady Hartwell," Marielle demurred. "Without your intervention, I would still be at St. Lyce's, forgotten by the world." The Duke's hand tightened slightly at her waist. You underestimate your own resilience, Miss Thorne. Lesser spirits would have been broken by what you endured. As they whirled around the floor, Mariel felt herself yielding to the music and the moment. Perhaps we are both right, Your Grace. Perhaps I am stronger than I knew, but needed someone to believe in that strength before I could recognize it myself. His grey eyes darkened with an emotion she dared not name. I have believed in you from the moment I read your mother's letters describing the brave, intelligent girl who stood by her through illness. Nothing I have witnessed since has diminished that belief. Words failed Mariel then, her heart too full for speech. They completed the dance in a silence more eloquent than any conversation, the unspoken connection between them observed and noted by every watchful eye in the ballroom. Later, as their carriage rolled toward Valcrest in the small hours of the morning, Lady Hartwell dozed lightly across from them, while the Duke sat beside Mariel, a proper distance maintained, despite the intimacy of the enclosed space. "You should be exceedingly proud of yourself," he said softly, his voice pitched not to disturb his aunt. "You faced both society and your father with equal courage." Mariel smiled tiredly. "It was not as difficult as I had feared. Few things are when confronted directly," he observed. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "I wonder if I might call upon you tomorrow. There is a matter I wish to discuss privately." Something in his tone sent a tremor of anticipation through her. "Of course, Your Grace, I am at your disposal. But your—" As the carriage continued through the moonlit countryside, Mariel gazed out the window, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from convent cell to aristocratic ballroom, and wondering what new path might open before her come morning. Morning arrived at Valecrest Manor with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through Mariel's curtains despite her desire for continued sleep. The events of the previous night, her triumph at the ball, the unexpected confrontation with her father, the Duke's enigmatic request to speak with her, swirled through her mind as Agnes quietly prepared her morning toilette. "His Grace has been in the rose garden since dawn, miss," the maid mentioned casually, as she arranged Mariel's hair in a simple but becoming style. "The gardeners say he's inspected every bloom twice over." Mariel caught Agnes's knowing look in the mirror and blushed. "His Grace is particular about his gardens. Lady Hartwell has mentioned as much." "Indeed, miss, though he's never shown such interest in the white roses before." Agnes secured a final pin. "Those are the ones nearest the south terrace, where Lady Hartwell takes her morning tea, which she has invited you to join, by the way." The implication was clear. The Duke was lingering near where Mariel would likely appear. The thought sent a flutter of nerves through her stomach as she selected a morning dress of pale blue muslin, simple enough for breakfast at home, yet flattering enough for whatever might follow. Lady Hartwell greeted her on the terrace with a suspiciously satisfied smile. "Good morning, my dear. You were the undisputed success of the evening. I've already received 3 calling cards from mothers of eligible sons." Mariel took her seat at the small table, accepting a cup of tea. "Surely you exaggerate, my lady." "I do not," Lady Hartwell insisted. "The Tun adores nothing so much as a narrative of unjust suffering nobly endured. You provided them with the perfect romantic tragedy, and now they await the final chapter with bated breath." Before Mariel could inquire about this cryptic statement, she caught sight of the Duke emerging from the rose garden below. He carried a single white rose, twirling it absently between his fingers as he climbed the terrace steps. "Good morning, ladies," he greeted them, looking unusually refreshed despite the previous night's late hour. "I trust you slept well?" Lady Hartwell raised an eyebrow. "As well as can be expected after such excitement. You seem remarkably alert yourself, Darian." A faint smile touched his lips. "I find I require less sleep when my mind is engaged with important matters." His gaze shifted to Mariel. "Miss Thorne, might I impose upon you for that private conversation I mentioned last night? Perhaps a turn about the gardens when you've finished your breakfast?" "Of course, Your Grace." Mariel found it difficult to meet his intense gaze and focused instead on the rose in his hand. Following her glance, he extended it toward her. "For you," he said simply. "Its color reminded me of your gown last evening." The gesture, so uncharacteristically demonstrative for him, rendered Mariel momentarily speechless. She accepted the bloom with fingers that trembled slightly. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Lady Hartwell observed this exchange with poorly concealed delight. "Well, I suddenly recall correspondence requiring my immediate attention. Mariel, do not rush your breakfast on my account." She rose and, with a meaningful glance at her nephew, departed for the house. Left alone on the terrace, Mariel found herself unable to eat another bite. Her stomach knotted with anticipation. The Duke seemed similarly affected, his usual composure replaced by a restless energy as he waited for her to finish her tea. When she could delay no longer, she set down her cup. "Shall we walk, Your Grace?" He offered his arm, which she took with heightened awareness of the propriety and significance of such contact. They descended to the garden in silence, following a gravel path that wound through immaculately tended flower beds toward a small classical temple overlooking a reflective pool. Only when they reached this secluded spot did the Duke finally speak. "Miss Thorne, Marielle, I find myself in an unusual position this morning." She looked up at him, struck anew by the intensity of his grey eyes. "In what way, Your Grace?" "I'm accustomed to approaching matters directly, with clear purpose and defined objectives." He released her arm to pace a few steps before turning back to face her. "Yet I find myself uncharacteristically hesitant to address the subject I wish to discuss." Marielle's heart quickened. "Perhaps if you simply spoke plainly, Your Grace." "Darian," he corrected gently. "I would have you call me Darian, at least in private." "Darian," she repeated, the name feeling both foreign and right upon her lips. He drew a deep breath, his formal reserve momentarily yielding to vulnerability. "When I first discovered the injustice done to you, I acted from a sense of obligation, to your mother's memory, to my father's promise, to the principles of honor that guide my life." Marielle nodded, uncertain where this confession led. "But as I came to know you," he continued, his voice deepening, "obligation transformed into something far more profound. Your courage in adversity, your grace despite mistreatment, your fundamental goodness that 5 years of injustice could not dim. These qualities awakened feelings I had not known myself capable of experiencing." He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "I find, to my astonishment, that I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The house seems empty when you are not present. Conversations lack meaning when you do not participate. Even my gardens," he gestured to the beauty surrounding them, "seem diminished when not viewed through your appreciative eyes." Marielle stood perfectly still, scarcely breathing as his meaning became clear. "I had intended to wait," he admitted, "to allow you more time to adjust to freedom, to society, to possibilities beyond Valcrest. But last night, watching you face your past with such dignity, I realized that waiting served neither of us." He took her hands in his, the touch sending warmth cascading through her. "Marielle Thorne, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The words she had scarcely dared to hope for hung in the air between them. Marielle looked into his eyes and saw not pity, not obligation, but something far more precious, genuine love, offered freely by a man who rarely revealed his heart. "Your Grace." "Darian," she began, her voice unsteady, "are you certain? I bring no fortune, no powerful family connections. My reputation, while legally restored, will always carry whispers of past scandal." His expression softened with tenderness. "Do you imagine I care for such considerations? My fortune is substantial enough for both of us. My connections at court are secure. As for whispers, let them try to whisper against the Duchess of Valacrest." "The Duchess," she echoed, the title simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Not merely a title, he assured her, but a partner, someone to share both responsibilities and joys, someone whose courage and compassion might balance my occasional rigidity. A smile touched his lips. "Someone who sees the man beneath the ducal coronet, as you have from the beginning." Emotion welled within Marielle, too complex for simple expression. "When you found me at St. Lysa's, I was nothing, a forgotten woman with no future, no hope. That you would offer me not only freedom, but your heart." Her voice faltered. "You were never nothing," he corrected firmly. "You were always extraordinary. I simply had the good fortune to recognize it." His fingers tightened around hers. "Will you accept? Will you make Valacrest truly your home, not as guest or ward, but as its Duchess and my beloved wife?" In that moment, standing amid blooming roses with the morning sun illuminating his earnest face, Marielle felt the last shadows of her confinement fall away. 5 years of darkness yielded to a future radiant with possibility. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Darian, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features, erasing the last vestiges of aristocratic reserve. With gentle reverence, he raised her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers that sealed their engagement more profoundly than any formal announcement. "You have made me happier than I ever expected to be," he murmured. "As you have done for me," she replied, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This belonged to my grandmother. I had it reset for you." Opening the lid, he revealed a magnificent ring, a central emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in antique gold. "It's beautiful," Mariel breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. "A pale reflection of its wearer," he responded, his customary gravity giving way to undisguised adoration. As they walked back toward the house, where Lady Hartwell undoubtedly awaited news she had already anticipated, Mariel felt the weight of the ring on her finger, a tangible symbol of the transformation her life had undergone. From confinement to freedom, from shame to vindication, from loneliness to love. The amber cord still encircled her wrist, a reminder of her mother's love and the strength that had sustained her through darkness. Now beside it gleamed the Duke's emerald, a promise of the light that lay ahead. Together they represented her journey, not a tale of tragedy but one of triumph, not a story of what was lost, but of what, against all odds, had been found. The ancient chapel at Valecrest Manor had witnessed centuries of ducal weddings, but none perhaps as poignant as that which took place on a golden September morning, 6 weeks after the Countess of Merewood's ball. Autumn sunlight streamed through stained-glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across stone floors and illuminating the small but distinguished assembly that had gathered to witness the union of the Duke of Valecrest and Miss Mariel Thorne. Lady Hartwell had insisted on a modest ceremony rather than a London spectacle. "Let the tongue gossip from a distance," she had declared. "Your vows belong to you and to those who truly care for your happiness." The guest list reflected this philosophy. The Countess of Merewood, whose sponsorship had eased Mariel's re-entry into society, Father Alderic, whose quiet assistance had facilitated her escape from St. Lysa's, Lord Hatherton and his wife, whose legal expertise had secured her vindication, Lord Kenilworth and a handful of other friends who had known her mother, and standing somewhat apart, Lord Thorne, invited at Mariel's insistence, despite the Duke's lingering reservations. Their reconciliation remained tentative, built on careful correspondence and a single emotional meeting at Valecrest, under Lady Hartwell's watchful eye. Yet his presence today represented Mariel's determination to build her future without the burden of past resentments. "Are you certain about this gown?" Mariel asked, surveying her reflection in the antechamber where she prepared for the ceremony. The wedding dress, commissioned from London's finest modiste, was a masterpiece of ivory silk and Brussels lace. "It seems extravagant for such an intimate gathering." "Nonsense," Lady Hartwell replied, adjusting the delicate veil. "Darian would have dressed you in the crown jewels if I hadn't restrained him. Besides, the simplicity of the ceremony makes the splendor of your appearance all the more striking." Agnes, who had been promoted to lady's maid in recognition of her service, fastened the amber cord securely around Mariel's wrist, where it would remain even during the ceremony, a connection to her mother on this momentous day. "Her ladyship is right, miss," the maid said, blinking back tears. "You look like an angel. His Grace will be speechless." Lady Hartwell checked the clock. "It's time, my dear. Are you ready?" Mariel took a deep breath, her heart full to overflowing. "More ready than I have ever been for anything." The short walk from antechamber to chapel altar passed in a blur of emotion. Mariel registered the admiring murmurs of guests, the gentle strains of the organ, the scent of autumn roses and beeswax candles. But most of all she saw Darian waiting for her, his tall figure resplendent in formal attire, his grey eyes fixed upon her with such naked adoration that she nearly stumbled. Father Alderic conducted the service with evident emotion, his amber eyes shining as he led them through ancient vows, made new by the sincerity with which they were exchanged. When Darian placed the golden band beside his grandmother's emerald on Mariel's finger, his hand was steady, but his voice trembled slightly with the depth of his feeling. "With this ring I thee wed," he vowed. "With my body I thee worship. With all my worldly goods I thee endow." The words, traditional yet profound, echoed in the stone chapel as they had for generations of Valecrest dukes. Yet none, perhaps, had spoken them with greater conviction. When Father Alderic pronounced them husband and wife, Darian kissed her with reverent tenderness before the assembled witnesses, a public declaration of private devotion that left not a dry eye in the chapel. The celebration that followed in Valecrest's great hall was as elegant as it was intimate. Crystal sparkled in candlelight, footmen served delicacies on silver trays, musicians played softly in a corner. Yet the true magnificence lay in the transformation visible to all who had known Mariel before. The gaunt convent novice, now a radiant duchess, her natural grace enhanced rather than diminished by her elevated station. "You have made my nephew happier than I have ever seen him," Lady Hartwell confided, watching Darian lead Mariel through their first dance as husband and wife. And he has done the same for you, I think. He has given me more than happiness, Marielle replied softly. He has given me myself again, a self I thought lost forever. Later, as evening drew on and guests began to depart, Lord Thorne approached the couple somewhat hesitantly. Your Grace, he addressed his new son-in-law with careful formality, might I have a word with you and the Duchess? Darian's arm tightened protectively around Marielle's waist, but his voice remained courteous. Of course, Lord Thorne. They withdrew to a small adjoining salon, where Lord Thorne presented them with a velvet pouch. A wedding gift, he explained, though perhaps restoration would be a more accurate term. Inside lay a delicate necklace of amber beads matching precisely the cord at Marielle's wrist. It was your mother's, Lord Thorne said, his voice thick with emotion. The companion piece to your bracelet. I kept it all these years. Marielle touched the necklace with trembling fingers. I thought it lost with everything else. I could not bear to part with it, her father admitted. It was my last connection to Elaine, and to you. He glanced at Darian. With your Grace's permission, I would fasten it around my daughter's neck on her wedding day. Darian looked to Marielle, deferring to her wishes in this deeply personal matter. At her slight nod, he stepped back, allowing Lord Thorne to perform this paternal office. As the amber beads settled against her collarbone, Marielle felt a circle closing, not trapping her, as St. Lisa's walls had done, but completing her. Thank you, Father, she said simply. Lord Thorne bowed deeply. I wish you every happiness, my child, both of you. After he had withdrawn, Darian gathered Marielle gently into his arms. Are you well, my love? Today has been filled with profound emotions. I am more than well, she assured him, resting her head against his chest. I am complete in a way I never thought possible. The remainder of the celebration passed in a haze of joy and well wishes, until at last the time came for the couple to retire. Lady Hartwell, defying convention, embraced Marielle warmly before sending them off. Be happy, my dears. You have both earned it through trials few could comprehend. Their private apartments, formerly the Duke's, but now expanded and refurbished for two, awaited with welcoming warmth. A fire crackled in the hearth. Candles illuminated the bedroom with soft golden light. Vases of white roses scented the air with subtle fragrance. Alone at last, Darian gazed at his bride with wonder. I still cannot quite believe you are truly my wife, he confessed, taking her hands in his. That you chose to entrust your life to me. How could I not? Marielle replied softly. You restored my freedom, my name, my place in the world. You saw worth in me when I had forgotten it existed. You restored something in me as well, he said, drawing her closer. Before you, I lived by duty alone. You taught me that duty without love is hollow, a lesson I needed desperately to learn. As moonlight filtered through the windows, joining the candlelight to cast the chamber in a luminous glow, they sealed their union with kisses far more passionate than the chaste one exchanged in the chapel. Years of isolation had not diminished Marielle's capacity for feeling. If anything, it had heightened her appreciation for genuine connection. In Darian's tender yet ardent embrace, she discovered new freedoms beyond those he had already secured for her. The freedom to love and be loved without reservation, to trust without fear, to share body and soul with one who cherished her completely. Later, as they lay entwined in the great canopied bed that had sheltered generations of Valacrest dukes and duchesses, Marielle traced the strong lines of her husband's face with wondering fingers. What are you thinking? He asked, pressing a kiss to her palm. That life holds more blessings than I ever dared to hope, she replied, and that sometimes the darkest confinement can lead to the most profound liberation. He drew her closer, his arms a sanctuary rather than a prison. You are remarkable, my love. Many would have emerged from such injustice bitter and broken. You emerged with your capacity for joy intact. Not intact, she corrected gently. Transformed. Like amber itself, what begins as vulnerability, when subjected to pressure and time, becomes something precious and enduring. Darian smiled, touching the amber at her wrist and then at her throat, a fitting symbol for the Duchess of Valacrest. As they drifted towards sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth, Marielle reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from St. Lisa's cold cell to Valacrest's ducal bed. The path had been tortuous, marked by suffering she would not wish on anyone, yet it had led ultimately to a happiness deeper and more genuine than she might have known had her life proceeded along its expected course. The convent walls that had confined her body had never truly imprisoned her spirit. The shame others had tried to impose upon her had never truly penetrated her soul, and the love that now surrounded her, Darian's passionate devotion, Lady Hartwell's maternal affection, even her father's tentative reconciliation, proved that no heart is ever truly forgotten when someone cares enough to remember. In the years that followed, as the Duchess of Valacrest became known for her compassionate work with women unjustly confined or abandoned, she would often visit St. Lysa's, not as penitent or prisoner but as patroness. The amber at her wrist remained, a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come, and always the Duke would accompany her, his steady presence a testament to the truth they had discovered together, that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with a glance across a ballroom, but with a recognition of worth that the world has overlooked, and a hand extended to lead the forgotten back into the light. In the shadows of our deepest suffering often lie the seeds of our most profound redemption. Mariel's journey teaches us that true dignity cannot be stripped away by external circumstances. It remains within us, waiting for the courage to reclaim it. The world may forget us, but our worth never diminishes. Sometimes we need another's belief to recognize the strength we've carried all along. Like amber hardened through pressure and time, the human spirit can transform adversity into something precious and beautiful. True justice isn't found in vengeance, but in restoration, not in punishing those who wronged us, but in reclaiming the life that was always rightfully ours. Forgiveness, as Marielle discovered, liberates not just the forgiven, but the forgiver. And perhaps most powerfully, this story reminds us that no one is ever truly forgotten when genuine love exists. Even in our darkest confinements, whether physical or emotional, a hand may reach through the darkness to lead us back into the light, if we have the courage to grasp it. Did Marielle and Darian's journey from injustice to love touch your heart? Subscribe to our channel for more soul-stirring Victorian romances that explore the triumph of the human spirit through love's transformative power. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment in their story moved you most deeply? Was it Marielle's courageous confrontation with her father, Darian's heartfelt proposal, or perhaps the beautiful wedding where past pain yielded to future promise? If you know someone who needs a reminder that being forgotten doesn't mean being without worth, share this story with them. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can give another is the belief that their value remains, waiting to be recognized once more. Thank you for listening from all of us at Victorian Romance Audio Stories. Your support allows us to continue bringing these tales of redemption, courage, and enduring love to life. Until our next journey together, remember that no heart is truly forgotten when someone cares enough to remember.